Today I want to discuss about a very controversial topic, tragedy, also something which is very politically discussed, especially in America, but in some way in other parts of the world. And of course, I'm talking about assassination of Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk was an American citizen. I would say rather controversial figure. Uh, some of his thoughts, or maybe even all of them, were quite fundamentalist and Protestant fundamentalist. He was a Protestant, a Christian, and very devoted Protestant to the extent of being very fundamental in many cases he has discussed. And these cases, these political, especially debates and his opinions, would have caused him to be assassinated by a younger 27 years old suspect, a very brutal murder with a sniper rifle. And this murder was also recorded on public because he was discussing different topics in public, especially in universities, and there he has been shot and died. And it looked really gruesome. It looked very brutal, but especially now we have a very let's say divided America, like many societies. But America is divided in a way that many countries in the world are. So they are very right wing oriented, and and even if we can see in Europe, especially for example in Poland, that mostly right wing parties win. Here in Poland, right now we have moderate right center wing party ruling, but before that party, a radical right party has been ruling. And we have even more radical parties who weren't ruling after all, but they are still in our parliament. And for example, we have only one left-wing party, and this party has maybe, I don't know, 15 parliament members. So their opinions or their leadership is almost non-existent to political issues in Poland. And in America we have a similar situation, because right now Senate is in the hands of Republicans who are right-wing oriented, but most Republicans are also MAGA, so Make America Great Again slogan, invented probably by Donald Trump and using very often by him. And Donald Trump is the most radical right-wing president that have been elected in the maybe I'm not sure about 19th century, but in moderate times he is the most radical, and especially on this fundamental right-wing side, to the point that Supreme Court now is 6-3 judges are in the nominations of Republican presidents, and the Republican Party is conservative in social issues, and in economical issues it is very liberal. Democratic Party is a little bit different, but it's on the left, and it's for human rights and so on, and very in some way socialistic. But even Democratic Party, I'm not sure if this party is very left oriented, because after the savage murder of about 1,200 Jews, 250 prisoners or hostages, kidnapped, most universities, or let's say some important universities in USA agreed not openly but semi-openly agreed with this savage attack, and they are accusing Jews right now of making genocide of Palestinian Arabs, which is no, completely false, because genocide is a completely different term than a conflict, military conflict, and these military conflicts are often in Middle East and in Muslim world. And when we, for example, were discussing war in Yemen, war in Syria, sectarian violence between Sunnis and Shias in Syria, in Iraq, nobody has been using the term genocide or even war crimes, and there were plenty of them, and these savage murderers of Arabs, between Arabs, Sunnis, between Shias, and sometimes Muslims against the different religions. They have not been disclosed. They have not been released because Muslims usually act like a organized mob, like organized mafia, and they are only talking about things which make them good in public way, and they completely ignore or don't discuss those things which are extremely brutal from their side, and especially those attacks by Hamas fundamentalists, and most of them were young, 20-something years old men. 3,000 of them attacked Israel. About half of them died in this attack. And half of them returned with hostages to Gaza, and they even recorded on cameras how they have been butchering and slaughtering Jews. Very gruesome scenes, very brutal. And we can say that that the opposition forces in USA are, I would say, maybe even stronger than in Europe, in Poland, or in general in Eastern Europe. Even in Balkans maybe. And Charlie Kirk was in this camp of right-wing fundamentalists, Protestants, but I didn't. I almost completely didn't know his thoughts about different issues in America. But after his assassination, he has become famous, because he was still very famous in America to that point. He was a staunch supporter of Donald Trump. Maybe even his apologetics of Donald Trump to some extent caused Donald Trump to have won a second term. And a very unusual situation, because Donald Trump is a second president in USA history that he have one second term after losing one term. So he have won one term, then he to Hillary Clinton, then he lost to Joe Biden, and then he have won to Kamala Harris. And so Charlie Kirk was a right-wing conservative, let's say, but I wanted to see, because he was rather good, maybe not great, but rather good speaking figure, but also very fluent in making his agenda looking like he was not hateful or not spewing hate, and right-wing parties winning because they are nationalistic in their way. So if you are nationalistic, like for example Germans in Third Reich, they have won because they for example explained that Germans lost because the Jews and the communists were guilty of that, and it was to almost all of that was a lie. So right-wing parties need enemies to fuel this anger and this hatred, and he had done it very fluently, in a very fashionable way, to the point that you almost see like he's just discussing controversial issues, but all these controversial issues from his point of view, he was on the complete right side of the right side. So he was a fundamentalist in almost all cases. In cases of abortion, he was fundamentalist, and I wanna discuss in separate videos how his stance was on these different topics, because he had a very right-wing mind on topics of abortion, very controversial issue also in United States. He has a very so to the point that he has been saying that even underage raped girl need to born a child. And of course this is a lie, because he personally, if his daughter was raped, he wouldn't allow it to happen. But because he's a fundamentalist, he don't care about even if he's sane or not. He's just like many Protestants I see in America, unfortunately, that they are these white Protestants, usually male men, 20 something years old. He was 31 when he was assassinated. They are very radical in their views on almost all topics, and they are radical when they don't have nothing to lose. He had also very strong opinion about issues of gun and safety of gun, and because in America the Second Amendment to the Constitution and Constitution for Americans is almost like a semi-divine text. So the Constitution is almost like something which cannot be changed in almost anyway. But this is an amendment to this constitution, and it is about gun issues, and basically it allow citizens from, I don't know, 18 years old, 17 years old to have some kind of weapon. Many of them can be even assault weapons, so weapons which can be used to kill many people. This is because the violence, the gang violence, is so brutal in the United States. It's almost to the point that the deaths in America are almost equal to some countries in South America, and South America is the homeland of homicides by gangs, and so America is not very after that, and this is a problem, because not also because of the problem of gun acquiring, because usually these are young men who are doing these atrocities. For example, Charlie Kirk has been shot and killed with some kind of a bolt rifle, but it looked like to normal people like a sniper rifle. And he has been killed by a young man, 22 years old, so still very young man, and he was openly, to the point that we have a recording him to say that he's even sacrificing. He knows that he needs to sacrifice some lives to this amendment be still active, open, and able to be the law of the United States. So he has been open that he wants to even sacrifice some lives. It is needed to sacrifice some lives to this amendment be acceptable to the United States and be a law. And unfortunately for him, this murder, he probably didn't know that he will be murdered in this way by probably a white guy, probably a Protestant, probably not a Muslim guy, not Arab guy, not black guy, not Latino guy, but his fellow, and probably his fellow Protestant young male, young wild Protestant. And this, for example, this confirmation that he was allowed free weapon access was for him was for us, even for the world, very ironic, because he has been shot, and probably if this amendment was not as spread and prolific in the United States, this young man who have killed him wouldn't be able to acquire such a development and dangerous weapon. Charlie Kirk was also a very staunch supporter of Israel, but and most Jews right now are recording YouTube videos about him, thanking him against because he was also a staunch, ardent adversary to Islam in general. But I think that his view on Israel was rather not liking Jews as an ethnic group, but rather as something which is useful for Protestants, especially in America, because Protestantism generally, for example, Martin Luther was a staunch anti-Semite, maybe even worse than the Catholic Church. So Protestantism was not Protestant denominations were not. Maybe they were not as anti-Semitic as Catholic Church, but they were not also fully supporting the Jewish cause or the Jews as a different religion. But here in America right now, Protestants are supporting Israel because they believe that Jews needs to rule this land to the Messiah, to the second coming of Jesus Christ. So he was a supporter of Israel, but rather and people of Israel, rather as Israelis than Jews or the Jews who are believing in some kind of religion. But nevertheless, he had a very strong opinion against Islam and against Muslims in general, to the point that, and he was, let's say, I wouldn't call him supporters of the Jews, but a supporter of Israel cause and Israelis in Israel. To the point that he was even considering a removal of Palestinians from Gaza, so like ethnic cleansing. He didn't say that openly, but he was to some extent accepted this issue, and of course from his mouth it's a language of hatred, because for example from the point of view of Israelis who have been murdered by Palestinians in a very vicious and savage way, these kinds of opinions are understandable. But from the point of view of someone who is living in the United States, who are not his native country, because Native Americans are the native dwellers of this country, and of course even his ancestors didn't, let's say, conquer these lands, because the real conquerors of these lands are conquistadors, and the conquistadors were even in many parts of today, southern parts of USA. It was Mexico, but Mexico lost it in 19th century. And the diseases spreaded by conquistadors and probably by black slaves decimated Indian population. So even English people weren't the real conquerors of this land, because for example for the Spaniards, for conquistadors, for Spain, and also Arabs in 7th century, we can also admit that they have conquered this land. They have conquered this land. Native population was decimated, destroyed, but they have won it fair and square for that time of period. And of course, English population colonized the north parts of Northern America, and or north and eastern parts after those events from the Conquista. So Indian population was almost non-existent at the time of colonization of English, let's say English colonizers or English settlers. So we see that from his point of view, saying that it's somewhat okay to relocate Palestinians, it's a completely hateful language, but using in a very fashionable, very rhetorical intelligent way. So, for example, he also have a very staunch ideas against, for example, Latino immigration. He said that this is like an invasion, and of course, it's not an invasion because first of all, those southern parts of United States were the parts of Mexico for a very long time, and they were just conquered by United States Army in some way. And of course, it's not invasion; it's just, let's say, illegal immigration, because invasion is like something like a true, fully scale war between Russia and Ukraine. But he's using this term invasion to demonize, of course, Latinos, and of course, Latinos have a real problem. Latin America has a real problem not only with poverty but with gang violence. So he's using this term of illegal immigrations. I'm not sure if he was using the term like Donald Trump, that all these Mexicans or Latinos are rapists, but he's using this to demonize his opponents, to show that their, let's say, aggression against them can be to some way acceptable. And I see that many right-wing commentators and spectators accept this as a norm right now, because, for example, we have also two theories completely out of touch, but they will probably be proposed. One is from radical Islam, or radical Islam, or Islamic commentators, because right now they are almost all very radical, that Mossad or Israel decided that it will be useful to kill him, just not to talk about war in Gaza, and they are using also the term genocide. And the second is that it's spread by these right-wing fundamentalists, all of them, almost all of them Protestants, that we have some kind of left-wing radical agenda, and it's hidden, and it's far more complicated than just some young guy who wanted to kill Charlie Kirk. So I see that in every aspect. And for example, I have watched the debate with the Catholic, and Charlie Kirk was using. He was against many issues with Catholics, and he also, let's say, some of the issues were for him acceptable, and some of them were not acceptable. But he was a very staunch adversary of papacy, and especially of Pope Francis. At that time, he was a pope, and he even called him Marxist and communist. So I think it's also to the stereotypical type that all Southern America is Marxist, Leninist, or communist. So he is using this to, for example, for me as a Catholic, it's a hate language to disown our religion, and of course the orthodoxy of Catholicism, because the government of Pope was from almost the beginning of Christianity, and it was accepted by almost all Christianity to, let's say, Great Schism at the beginning of 11th century, and it was even acceptable to the point of Reformation. So the Pope, as a guarantee of our religion being orthodox, being true, being with the tradition, is extremely important to all Christians, even though they, for right now, they don't want to admit it. But when we see, for example, the history of the church, the papacy was, for example, when there was a conflict between Arius and Alexander in Alexandria, the Pope was, let's say, a middleman to broke some kind of common ground. And in another conflict where Nestorius was arguing with Cyril. Nestorius was from Constantinople, Cyril was from Alexandria. in Christological issues, because earlier ones between Alexander and Arius were if Jesus was God, and this one were how was the nature of Jesus Christ. So using the term and in this second debates against between Cyril and Nestorius, even though Pope decided that Nestorius is wrong and Cyril should depose him of his patriarchate, he still advised Cyril to be in a way moderate in his issues, in his theological thoughts. So we see that Pope was extremely important figure, if